Welcome to ExceedTV, produced by Exceed Online, an e-commerce and marketing agency based in Auckland, New Zealand and Sydney, Australia. My name is Jason Greenwood and I'm here with my co-host, Lance O'Grady.
How you going?
We have an exciting episode outlined for you today. We want to talk about something that's definitely near and dear to my heart. It's probably one of the topics that I get most excited about in terms of anything online, and that's Google Analytics. Also, we want to just let you know that we're going to be doing something a little bit different in terms of resources. We're going to start putting our outlines in terms of the discussion outline. We're going to put it in PDF format, and we're going to link to the resources page on our website underneath this video, as well as link to our Facebook page, as well as our blog. So that way, if you want to leave any questions, leave any comments, it'll be much easier for you to do so. And our outlines will include a lot more resources that you can also reference after the episode. So we're trying to spruce that up a little bit and make it a little bit easier for you to access all the information that we talk about during the episode. So look out for that. Lance, I'm quite happy to turn it over to you at this stage, and you can go into a little bit more detail about what we're going to talk about today.
Great. All right. Well, I guess you've said that it's about Google Analytics, and you're right. Mm-hmm. But I just want to tell everyone at home that this is a very high-level episode, and it's part 1 of 3.
Yes.
And all of the talking points we're going to cover today, and then in the coming episodes, could basically have an episode of their own. Google Analytics is a massive subject. There's a lot you can do with it. So, it's going to be very high level, but there's still going to be some really, interesting information in it.
Great.
And if you haven't heard about GA, Google Analytics, it's a very powerful web analytics tool that many people have built their careers around it. They're educating people, teaching people how to do it, or in fact, analyzing it for clients like we do at Exceed Online.
Sure.
So you'll find that Google Analytics, you have to be certified. Well, you don't have to be certified, but a lot of companies are now wanting you to be certified to do such roles because it's such an in-depth topic. And Google offer the certification programs. They've got their whole GAIQ certification program. They've got all the resources in there. You can do all the training in the site, and then you just pay and get your certification. And that way, you can display that in your CV and on your website if you've got it, that you are in fact certified to work on GA.
Sure.
So I guess now that we kind of know a bit about it, I'll hand it over to you, and you can go into a bit more detail about what it does.
Fantastic. Well, what is Google Analytics? That's the key question that we're trying to cover today. Once again, a very high level because it's an in-depth subject. It's basically a clickstream analytics tool, and that's a fancy name for for browser-based tracking of website usage, primarily clicks, page views, and the outcomes that they achieve. So it's basically tracking everything that a visitor might do on your website, and all the outcomes that happen as a result of those clicks and those views. That's really what it is. It actually started life as a paid tool. A lot of people don't know this. It was actually a paid software tool owned by Urchin Analytics. It was purchased actually originally by Google in 2005 and promptly made free, which upset a lot of people in the industry because there's a lot of other analytics tools out there, but they can't compete. The one thing they can never compete in is price. They always cost more than free. So Google definitely made a huge change when they turned around and made it free. Excellent product for free. It's a software as a service tool, so you don't have to host anything yourself. You don't have to run anything on your local machine. It's all browser based and it's all hosted by Google. So that's a nice little feature. You don't have to bear any cost there in that regard. It's basically a piece of JavaScript code that gets installed on the page that references a specific Google Analytics account and feeds all the data to Google underneath that account.
Okay.
So that piece of JavaScript code sets a tracking cookie in the visitor's web browser as soon as they hit a page that has that analytics code built into it. So that's how they track it. It's a system. It's a cookies-based thing. So basically, if you delete all the cookies from your browser, your history when you arrive back at that site again, it will effectively look like a new visitor. Okay. So away you go. What will it tell you? The question is probably more appropriate to say, what won't it tell you? It will tell you just about everything that a visitor does whilst they're on your site, where they click, what they do, how long they linger on a page. Obviously, there's some additional information that you can get out of Google Analytics beyond a basic setup. You need to do a little bit of configuration within Analytics to pull in things like what search queries somebody used on your website if they were doing site search, to be able to track e-commerce tracking tracking, so revenue, sales, products sold, all that sort of stuff. That requires a little bit of additional configuration. But other than that, it's pretty much ready to rock out of the box. The one thing that is hard and difficult to communicate to clients in some instances is the fact that it's quantitative data. So it's the volume of data, the hard data of what someone's actually done on the website. No individually identifiable data, so it doesn't pull any personal information in. It's broad, generic data in the sense that it's just aggregating groups of information for you, and nothing that can tie it to an individual user. One of the limitations of GA is the fact that it's not qualitative, it's quantitative. So it won't tell you intent. It won't tell you why somebody did something. It will tell you, you can extrapolate a little bit of that information, but it's not going to come out and tell you, I didn't like this page, so I bounced. Yeah. It won't tell you why they didn't like that page. It will tell you that they bounced, that they came, they saw, they left without doing anything, but it won't tell you why they did that.
It's open to interpretation.
Absolutely, and that's part of what makes a good Google analyst is being able to interpret that data and trying to put some meaning behind that. There's other tools out there to give you that qualitative analysis in addition to GA. Latest addition to GA5, most people don't know, Google Analytics 5 has just been released, and in fact, it was released a few months ago, but they're slowly forcing people to use this new version of Google Analytics. It's got a slightly different user interface and some new features and functions. So they're slowly phasing that out, making it difficult to access the old version. It's added some really exciting new things. It's added social tracking. It's added additional dashboards, which we'll go into more detail in future episodes. But it basically has made it a little bit easier to use in some respects, added more reporting capability. So it's definitely added functionality, and once again, they aren't charging any extra for it. It's still free. So it's pretty exciting in that regard. In terms of Google Analytics market share, it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, really, in terms of deployment. It's running on 98% of all the websites running some form of analytics software.
Oh, okay.
So 98%, it's
pretty staggering.
It's a pretty huge percentage.
Basically,
just about everybody who's running analytics.
Yeah, everyone who wants to know is in the know of what's happening.
Another interesting statistic that I pulled up was that it's running on 60% of the top 10,000 websites by traffic. So in the world, in terms of top 10,000, it's 60%. So this is an analysis by a company called BuiltWith, and we'll reference that report in our report in terms of the outline here. So I might turn it back over to you, and you can talk about a little bit more in depth about how a client of ours, obviously if they're a client of ours, we would typically do the installation for them. But if they're not a client of ours and they want to get GA, how do they do it?
Absolutely. I think the easiest option would be to get someone like Exceed Online to do it. I mean, that's because when we do it, we follow best practice guidelines. We're making sure everything is installed as it should be. But of course, that's not necessarily an option. You can of course do it, by yourself. So, there is a Google setup guide available online, and we'll put the links below the video for that. And that'll kind of run you through the whole process. But it is fairly straightforward in terms of a very basic setup. But to get the real, nitty-gritty details, you should potentially look at getting someone to install it for you. So what you need to do first is obviously create a Google Analytics account, and this can be part of your overall Google account, or you can link it into Analytics, or you can just create a new one specific to Analytics if you like. And from there, you sign in, you set up your website. It's a few fields. You've got to put what your website is, time zone, things like that, and it will generate some code. That code you need to put on your site in the header. Now, this is something that's changed. A lot of people think it can go anywhere on the site or in the footer, but realistically, for it to be working at its best, it needs to be in the header, because that's, it needs to call the script as soon as the page loads, not right down the bottom in case something stops that script loading.
Sure.
So once you've got it on the site, you've got a few more advanced options. I mean, if you've got subdomain or cross-domain tracking, that's a lot more advanced, and that's if you've got shop.exceedonline.co.nz, for example.
Yes.
And exceedonline.co.nz. Those are subdomains, so you'd want to try and track both of those through the one GA account, or if you're trying to track multiple domain names.
Sure. Under the one account.
Under the one account.
Sure.
So that's a very advanced feature, and that can take, that might require a bit of expert advice on that one. In terms of what we like to do next is set up IP filters or even other filters. So this is, depending on your network setup, this can be difficult, but if you've got a static IP address, it's always good to just add that in as a filter, so you can filter out all traffic from your IP. So for a company, a lot of companies use their own website as almost a product search. So if somebody calls up and looking for a product, and they'll go on the website and tell them the price.
Or if they've got an intranet, for example.
Yeah, well, exactly. But all these people, every time they go on the site, and they don't buy something, they're counting as a visitor who didn't buy something. So they're skewing the statistics. So
Sure.
if you can filter out that traffic, at least your analytics data is going to be a lot more accurate in terms of showing what the actual customers are doing.
It's going to be clean data, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Good point.
Another thing that you can do is set up tracked goals, and then with that goal funnel. So a standard goal would be the checkout, and the goal would be the checkout success, but your goal funnel would be the checkout process. So you'd have step 1 logging in, step 2 shipping details, step 3 billing, and that way you can see, by setting up an appropriate goal funnel, you can see where people are dropping out, and work out how you can improve those pages.
Right.
So it's a powerful feature there.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, you can see if you've got something on your website that's a goal, and you're trying to lead them almost like a cookie crumb or a breadcrumb, and leading them around by the nose and trying to get them to take action on a certain page. You can see where they fall out of that process and try to optimize and analyze why they might fall out of that, and see if you can fix it.
Yeah, I mean, 9 times out of 10 you can fix it. That's if you notice a strong percent of people leaving on the billing entry page, it might be because it's too repetitive. There might not be an option to tick to say same as shipping, or whatever the case may be. So there is all sorts of things that you come from that.
Great.
So from goal funnels, it's always good to set up e-commerce tracking. Now, obviously, that's only if you're an e-commerce website, but it's probably one of the most powerful features that you can get in GA, because that way you can track costs versus revenue.
Yep.
And so many companies don't do it, and it is complex. It's on some platforms like Magento, it's very easy. You can just basically put your UA number in the back end, and it will do it all for you.
Yep.
But a lot of times it's manual, and you've got to set up variables and transaction amounts, product names, all that type of thing. So it can be quite complex.
It is.
But it's definitely worth your while in doing, because, as I say, you get all sorts of information about how much money you're making. You might not know otherwise. A lot of people don't.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we provide a tagging guide. We have a tagging guide service as part of our Google Analytics services. So if you're on a platform that isn't Magento, you want to implement it yourself, or let's say you've got an IT company, a designer or something like that is managing your website for you, but you want some consultation around Google Analytics, we can provide you a tagging guide, and basically that gives you the step-by-step process and the code that needs to be entered in the website, where to put it, and that way you can actually track those transactions like Lance was talking about.
Yeah, and similar to another thing, I guess, that people don't normally do, and it's a lot, in most cases, it's a lot easier to enable.
Yes.
And that's site search tracking, and it can be very, very powerful in terms of seeing what people are looking for on your website.
Yep.
You can see what products are popular, what categories are popular, and then you can also see the value of search, I guess, which a lot of people are underestimating. Typically the conversion rates for people who actually search on the site are considerably higher.
It's usually double, if not more.
Yeah, normally, if take an average conversion rate, so 5%.
5%, say.
I've seen 15%,
Easy.
20% conversion rate from site search. So it's very powerful, and it can really, show you the value. And sometimes it's as simple as putting in a few variables in the back end in the admin section of GA.
Yep. And I think the other thing that's worth pointing out, and you've brought up a good point, is that with site search tracking, you can see what products are being searched for that you don't carry,
yes.
and that'll give you an idea of how to expand your range and where to expand where the demand already is. The other thing that you can do is obviously customize your landing pages, and that's
yes.
really important. So,
Yeah.
so I know that in Magento, not all platforms allow this, but in Magento, you can, when somebody does a specific site search, you can land them on any page intentionally on your website that you like, instead of just presenting them with a list of results.
So you're redirecting them to a specific page.
That's right, and the idea is to get them more deeply embedded in the buying process straight out of the gate, and you can only do that if you know what they've actually used to query.
For, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. A final thing in this, doesn't apply to a lot of sites. It depends on what type of content you've got, but it's to create event tracking. And using event tracking, you can, I guess, track PDF downloads, for example. You normally wouldn't be able to do that. You need to install event tracking. So if they click, download the PDF, it actually counts it as a goal, I guess. And then you can see how many people are actually downloading your your white papers or your PDF brochures or whatever the case may be. So and it's not just that. I mean, you can install it on videos, for example. If you've got embedded videos, you can install event tracking on the play, pause, stop, all those buttons as well. So it can be very powerful. But again, it's a little bit more advanced than it doesn't come out of the box, and it does require a bit of setting up and it's all in the Google knowledge base on how to do this. But typically those instructions do kind of read like stereo instructions, and it can be quite difficult to get your head around.
It's a bit dry, but like Lance says, it's really critical to know what a client is doing, or a potential client, or just a visitor in general is doing on your website. We track all of our PDF downloads, so we know what's been downloaded, what numbers of those have been downloaded. We do track things when we embed YouTube videos on our website and things like that. We do want to track, has somebody watched the entire video, if they watched the first 10 seconds of it, the start, the stop, the pause. We do a lot of event tracking, and in the old school way of doing things, you used to generate a theoretical page view, a hypothetical page view, and that distorted a lot of your other metrics. So by having just it tracking the event as opposed to creating a virtual page view, as it were, you're tracking just the event. So good points.
And I guess now you'd be wondering, how much does it cost? And it's, as Jason's mentioned before, it's a free tool. It's a free tool, but it is somewhat misleading.
Yes.
Because you install it, and then you've got to factor in either your time, because your time does, it is worth something.
Well, it should be anyway.
Yeah, well, it should be. You've got to factor in your time for either looking at the data and represent, trying to work out what's going on, or in some cases you've got to factor in the cost for a person who's doing it externally. So you might get a company like Exceed Online to do it, and obviously there's a lot of value in that.
Oh, our slideshow stopped back here, so sorry about it. We just lost our logo in the background. But anyway, you get the idea.
But no, it is a free tool, but you've got to consider exactly, I suppose, the overall cost. But then at the same time, you've got to think about the benefits to your business. So there might be a cost in getting a third-party person like Exceed Online, or doing it yourself, and obviously your time. But you've got to think, how much benefit am I gaining from Google Analytics? And the answer is definitely a lot of value.
Well, I believe it's almost immeasurable. It's one of the few tools that I get really truly excited about. I know, talking about analytics and data and figures and numbers and number crunching and bean counting can get really, really boring at times. But honestly, some of the data that you can pull out of GA is so overwhelming, and it is so interesting, and it's so actionable, that really it will change your life. It will change your business. I hate to sound like a like a cheerleader, but I am a cheerleader definitely of Google Analytics for all the reasons that we've pointed out, and that we're going to go into more in depth in the next couple of episodes. And as Lance has pointed out, certainly time has a value. And at the end of the day, sometimes you're better to outsource the functions of your business. You probably wouldn't be your own lawyer. You probably wouldn't be your own accountant. You probably don't want to be your own GA analyst.
Yeah, absolutely.
But by the same token, if you do have those skills, if you've got number crunching skills, and you have the time to learn about it, do it yourself, brilliant. We've covered really the scope of GA, its market share, how you get it, and its cost. So we've covered a lot of ground today, and over the next couple of weeks, we're going to get into a little bit more in depth in GA, and then the final week, the third week, we have a special surprise interview for you, and we'll talk about that at that time. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.